Okay. So one of the things that I'm learning as I'm bodging my podcast is
I was
that
actually hoping you could give me some insight because I want to start a podcast.
okay,
uh,
cool. Well, I don't know if I can give you any insight, but I can tell you one of the things I really struggle with, and you might see this in some of the podcasts that I've recorded, is I go from giving that background and then I launch into right big question, and everyone's sort of like, oh whoa, shit, that's like diving straight into the deep end. And
mm,
so I'm trying to test out a new way of trying to have a little bit of small talk before I get
sure.
into the thing. So I got some little questions to ask you about you, the person, and then we'll get into who you are and the work that you're doing, and
Uh,
we'll
I
see
don't
how
even know
that
if
goes.
I don't even think there's much distinction anymore, really, to tell you the truth. It's just taken over my life in the best way possible.
I got that feeling, but let's see if we can get get
Oh, yeah,
get a
go for
little
it, go
bit
for
of who. Oh, by the way, do you pronounce your name Rob Dimmitt or Dymott
it.
or
Second one.
another way?
Second
Dymott.
way. Yeah,
Okay,
Dymott, yeah.
Rob Dymott. Dymott. Okay. So starting off with some simple questions. Whereabouts were you brought up?
I was actually brought up in the southeast of the UK, in the county of Essex, kind of
Yeah.
like an hour's train ride from London,
Yeah.
but far out enough to kind of consider. I mean, people from London come to where I live and they call it the countryside, but it's not.
Right. Okay.
Um, well, I mean, I don't call it the countryside if you consider just agriculture to be the countryside. But yeah, no, it's a relatively small town, and although I've travelled a fair bit and I've been around, I still kind of live very close to where I grew up. Yeah.
And so you talked about traveling. Where's where's a country that you would really like to visit, but that you haven't?
Oh, that I haven't. Well, that's a very good question. I don't know, to tell you the truth. I would say where I would like to go back to, which I didn't have enough time in, was
Sure.
New Zealand, which was New
Ah,
Zealand.
cool.
I only went to the South Island, so maybe the North Island. To give a better answer to your question, I would probably like to go to Japan.
Oh
Um,
yeah, Japan's great.
yeah, I'm not sure where, but maybe, yeah, maybe
And,
Japan. Yeah.
and why is that?
Um, because I've never been there, just to experience it. It's a
Yeah.
culture I've never experienced. And I would like to go into like rural parts of Japan. Yeah, I'm not someone who travels to cities a great deal. If I go somewhere, I generally try and get out of the city as quick as possible. But I guess that's explanatory from the kind of content I make.
Sure. So growing up in Essex, I'm guessing you went to school there. What
Mm.
what um what was your favorite subject when you were at school?
Um, Favorite subject. Well, what one of my favorite teachers, he taught history, um, and I've I I mean I wouldn't say I was the best student, but I enjoyed his lessons because he was quite clearly passionate about it.
Hmm.
Um, I was pretty much a bang average student across all topics. I never really applied myself a great deal in school.
Sure.
Um, I had to work hard at things like maths and science. But no, I would say history always caught my interest, and sport like PE. Like I love well, I loved running. I don't run as much as I should do now.
Right.
But yeah.
And so what did you like what did you want to be when you grew up? Was it always conservation or
No, well, I mean, it was never really a consideration until you get to about 18, and then you go through high school. Then you have this thing called sixth form, which is like the bit after high school, but it's still technically high school.
Mhm.
Um, and then in that moment, I was like, well, what should I do now? And then best advice from parents and family and what some of my friends were doing was to go to university, and there I decided to go down the route of pursuing, yeah, like conservation or anything related to being outside. Because I kind of said to myself, I was like, I definitely don't want to have a desk job. Um,
Hmm.
so perhaps pursuing something to do with nature could be the best route of doing that.
And so, did you have like a gateway animal that kind of got you passionate, or a gateway habitat, or experience?
Oh, gateway animal. What, into the world of rewilding and ecology? I think it's just this idea of wilderness,
Hmm.
and this idea of change, um, especially living in the UK, like in the southeast of the UK, where the landscape has changed so much.
Right.
Um, yeah, it was just this. Yeah, it was just this like cool idea of like untouched forests, and I guess the creatures which live within them as well. So, I mean, like wolves have always been fascinating to me. Beavers. Yeah, yeah. I have to admit, I'm not necessarily into like smaller. I mean, I am interested into smaller like invertebrates and things, but I'm not like this person who generally like obsesses over
Right.
over bugs and stuff. But trees in general, trees. I have to admit, trees. Yeah, I mean, I used to work as an arboriculturalist,
Hmm.
working at a consultancy where we did look at aspects of ecology, but it was predominantly trees which I was interested in. So yeah, I guess oaks. If you wanted a species, it would be the English oak. Yeah,
The English oak.
yeah.
So I want to get into. I want to spend most of our time talking about your work at Leave Curious. I'm really intrigued to learn about your experience there and how you got into that. But obviously, a big part of what you do is your work with Mossy Earth. Could you just give us a bit of an introduction to Mossy Earth and your role in the organization?
So Mossy Earth are a company which run a membership subscription which anybody can be a part of. Um, and it's a monthly membership, and that money goes towards setting up and funding rewilding and nature restoration projects, which is kind of now all over the world. But I think what sets Mossy Earth apart is the way that they market their work, and how transparent they are with their work, and that is through videos, through specifically YouTube. So there's a Mossy Earth YouTube channel, and that's kind of where my role is there in the company, is to contribute to making videos about their projects. And that's kind of Mossy Earth in a nutshell, really. I mean, I think what sets us apart as well is we don't just generate funding; we also set up the projects too. So we have a team of biologists and not conservationists, like ecologists, and we have, as well as working with partners to put money in the best places. We also set up our own projects too. So that's pretty cool.
And so your project at Leave Curious is also it's your own YouTube channel where you work to cover a lot of the rewilding projects across the UK. Which came first for you? Was it Mossy Earth or Leave Curious?
No, it was definitely Leave Curious. I was actually making so Leave Curious came after a few years of uh, being on YouTube. I was, going through a phase in my
Okay.
life. Yeah, I was going through a phase in my life where I was trying lots of different things, as you kind of do when you're young.
Hmm.
And I was just kind of always knew YouTube could be this really cool. It was something I was really interested in. Like, do you want me to get into what I was doing like just before Leave Curious?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so I went for university, didn't enjoy it a great deal because I'm not an academic necessarily.
Hmm.
Very, I'm really not good at like scientific writing and that kind of thing. So although I was really interested in the topics, I was frustrated a lot of the time.
Sure.
Um, and then I went on and did a course which was a bit more specific, looking at arboriculture in the UK. I
Hmm.
then got a job working at a consultancy where it was cool to be like kind of doing a job which I was interested in. Um, I was very much interested in going out and looking at old trees and this, that, and the other. But for again, it kind of came back to this idea that the way I expressed myself was I had to write a report at the end of the day. And more often than not, that report is just a means to an end for a development project. Um, like I slowly realized that I was just a cog in this bigger thing, which was about development. And although you are working to preserve aspects of the landscape, for the most part, I just felt a little bit bummed out by that.
Hmm.
I guess in the end. But while I was doing this, I was also making. I also had a vlog channel where I was just making videos about my day, like whatever that was. These videos were really bad, and I've like since unlisted them, and like no one can watch them now. But I did this for maybe 2 or 3 years, and I made hundreds of them. I
Right.
guess in retrospect, looking back, it was like that was my arc of getting to understanding how to make YouTube videos. Was this like this real grind of making vlogs, and then Leave Curious came around, and then I started Leave Curious, and it was this moment where I don't know why I didn't come to this sooner, but I kind of married these two ideas of one YouTube and video, and then this passion for wildlife, and that was what Leave Curious was. Um,
And I mean, even in Leave Curious, it's been what 3 years now since you first started posting. There's been an evolution, and I'd like to talk a bit about that. But you mentioned that there was something in the vlogging where you sort of you learned or you developed a skill or something during that time. What is it like? What are some of the things you learned about it, about storytelling at
oh,
that time?
so much. I think making YouTube videos, there's core skills and core things you need to do. Um, and it kind of all revolves around firstly the ideas, the topics which you make videos about, the ideas you can pull from that, and then also how you package those ideas. That's the first thing. So in the process of making those vlogs, I would just pick up the camera and I'd film my day. I wouldn't have any consideration to really what like it was a mismatch. Like I was studying, I was traveling, I was renovating an old Land Rover. I was doing all of these things that I would film and mash into a video and like present that. So I guess the core thing was getting really focused on what my stories were that I was telling. Um,
Yeah.
and then bringing that across to Leave Curious, it felt really rewarding to be making videos about one, which were things which were outside of myself. Like I wasn't the topic. I might be presenting the videos, but it wasn't about me and my life. It was more about like something which was wider than myself, and that felt really good. Um,
When I found it interesting because when you started Leave Curious, the first few videos were tree talks, right? So it was like
yes,
a little bit of information about a certain type of tree,
yeah,
and you did a few of those, and then you did a video about rewilding,
yeah.
and you were in Wallasey, which seems to be like an important place for you. And then after that, it seemed like you really got onto the rewilding storytelling. And was there sort of was that planned, or did you kind of come across that?
I would say that yeah, so I started out making the Tree ID videos, and they're very one-dimensional in a way.
Mhm.
The the people you can reach with those kind of videos are is kind of restricted to people that are interested in learning about tree species. But rewilding, I guess, came around as this. I mean, it's still a hard thing to try and define. I made a video recently about how you define
Yeah, we'll talk
rewilding.
about that.
But for me at the time, it just seemed like this really exciting idea that as a creator, I could just branch off into so many different things. Um, and whilst it's still being about a core idea, which is I realize this now, but for me, like the content is always about nature coming back or like nature restoration, and however that manifests, it might be a project at Wallasey, which is a wetland creation, like really interesting project, or it could be like about reintroducing water voles to a pond or anything, and as a creative, having that diversity of things I can like sort of dip into is really fun, and I think for the viewer as well, that's also really fun as well. So I guess now for Leave Curious, I do see it as like this. You kind of you know what you're going to get, but you don't know what you're going to get. If you know what I mean, in terms of the stories, it could be something, um, but you know that at its core, it is going to be about nature coming back. Um, but in terms of being really deliberate about that, my whole journey has always just been try things and see how they work out. And a lot of the time, I would say I don't think I, especially through this vlogging phase which I spoke about, I
Yeah.
didn't apply this kind of growth mindset to it. I was very much just doing it because it was fun, and I wasn't really prioritizing why things weren't working out because the vlog channel didn't work out. Um, so yeah, as I've gone on through the years, I'm a lot more critical and I guess analytical of how I do things.
And so now you're at around 50,000 followers,
Hmm.
and you know, for someone who's doing generating the content alone, I believe you're doing it alone.
Yeah,
Is that right? I
yeah.
think that's hugely successful. You spoke a little bit about, you know, sort of the focus of ideas and things like that. But what else? Why do you think you've? Why do you think Leave Curious has taken off?
Well, it's gained momentum. I mean, in the context of YouTube blow ups, it's definitely not blown up. It's been this
Sure.
very, I mean, but recently I would say it's finding its feet a bit more. And why that's happening is probably um one, it's like I'm maturing in the way that I'm like as a creative, I do it all myself, but I am very much, I'm not really a master of anything. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, and you kind
Hmm.
of need to be if you're doing a YouTube channel on your own. You need to know how to do, the ideas, the scripting, the presenting, the editing. So I would say like now I'm kind of coming into this phase of my Leave Curious is coming into a place now where it's less about figuring out what you have to do, and it's more about just doing it. Um, so that's really quite satisfying. But now I'm thinking like, no, like now I know what to do. I kind of need to build on it, and try and take things further because you can't really rest on your laurels too much when you do a YouTube channel. You always need to kind of be thinking about what's coming next. Um,
And is that a real challenge with the YouTube channel? It's not a case of, you know, you can take a break for a few months. Like, do you
oh
have to
no,
constantly think about, okay, I need to get something out next week, and be? Does it sort of put you under a bit of pressure in that way?
yeah, massively. Like YouTube is
Okay.
it is you. So I mean, there's ways of thinking about this. So what I mean, it's like to get into like not to get too specific with the YouTube algorithm, but what they
Sure.
want is for people to click on videos and for people to watch them. So now you can do this on a weekly basis, or you can do this on a monthly basis. The trouble is that when you do one thing a certain way, so with Leave Curious, I've near enough done. There was a good chunk of time where I didn't upload for a while, but that's because I was busy with other things. But once you start feeding it a video a week, you kind of
Mhm.
need to keep up that cadence. Otherwise, you get what we refer to as a dead channel, where like even if you release a great video, the channel's cold. And
Right.
so like momentum is so huge with like YouTube growth. Um, so yeah, you need to. I mean, it's like anything in life, I guess. If you really want to take things and like build on things, you need to be somewhat relentless. But yeah, I mean, that's just part of the job in a way.
And so, if you don't mind, I'd love to. So, from my perspective, from the outside, I was looking at your channel. I was trying to figure out,
Mm,
you know, what is it that he's doing well, and the thing that I connect with first up is your passion. Like, I
mm,
find that your passion for the subject matter is really infectious, and and it's not like a standoffish kind of passion, right? Like, you're in there, you're in the mud, you've got the animal in your hands, you're
mm,
really you can see that you love doing what you're doing. So I feel like
Mm,
from my perspective, that's one of the key things. But then I was just sort of analyzing your channel a little bit, and I felt like the you create a really nice hook with each
mm,
story. It's not
mhm,
like an enormous story. Each story is quite focused, as you mentioned,
mm,
and you've got your thumbnail, which hits the hook. And then when I click in and I watch what your film is about, it delivers on the hook and then more. Right? Like I
mm.
always learn something as well, and I
Oh,
just
that's good.
thought that was really cool. And 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 I think part of the reason why I was trying to analyze it was because I was looking at some of the other storytellers in this sector, right? So I was looking at some of the big brands, the big NGOs like Greenpeace, Oxfam,
Mm,
Sea Shepherd, etc., etc. And when you compare their numbers for the number of videos that their subscribers, sorry, for the number of videos that they put out, I mean, it's just nothing compared to yourselves and Mossy Earth. Like of all of the examples I looked at, yourselves and Mossy Earth are really a long way ahead of all the other channels. And you and Mossy Earth, there's similarities in your storytelling style, I feel. Why is that? Like, what's the problem with what they're doing?
I think it's just not I think it's just not adopting what YouTube really wants. Or and what I mean by that is they're not optimizing their videos. Sure, they probably got. I see a lot of these like big NGOs and big companies release good videos, but they're falling at the first hurdle, which is their title and thumbnail. Like if you're not like if you don't that's the first thing that anybody sees on your video. And if you've got a bad title and thumbnail, no one's going to click on it. It doesn't matter if you produced a great video, it's just not going to get the views. So I think that's one element to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's just maybe they don't feel like it's a priority, you know? Maybe they feel like they can get funding in other ways, that maybe they feel like they can reach people in different ways. Maybe they're already established as a company, because especially for Mossy Earth, like YouTube has been kind of integral to the rise of Mossy Earth, and it still is very much integral to how Mossy Earth functions. So for us, it's really important. But maybe for like these bigger companies, they just see it as like an afterthought. It's like, oh, it would be nice if we could make more videos, but we've got other work which needs to sort of get done, you know? It's not a priority. And perhaps they are, yeah. I mean, I've sent many emails to these bigger companies being like, because I recognize this as well, being
Right.
like, do you want help? Like, do you want me to come and like whether if it's through Leave Curious or in other ways, because they're all doing fascinating things, you know, really good work, but they're just not putting it out there so they can expand their reach and reach all these people. I'm an advocate of everyone should have a YouTube channel. It doesn't matter if you're doing nature restoration, like whatever it is you're doing, like it, it is going to be interesting, but not everybody wants to do that. Is what I need to remember.
So let me pull on that thread a little bit. So why do you think everyone should have a channel? Why do you think that's what kind of
Um,
value does that create?
it creates so like whether if you're I think of someone like my dad, right? My dad is he's just so great at making things with his hands. Like he makes guitars. He's done classical car restoration all his life, so he's brilliant at metalwork. And like one day he's making like a bow and arrow, like a longbow, and then the
Hmm.
next day he's making something else. And I feel like even if it's just something really niche and really specific, like he could have this YouTube channel where people can come and get inspired and be interested in what he's doing. um, I just think YouTube is a great place to be really specific about what it is that you want to watch. Um, and no matter how niche or how specific that interest is, more often than not, there's someone making videos about that. And then you build a community, you inspire people. Yeah, that's why I think everyone should have a channel because, yeah. I mean, that in a nutshell is why. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I tend to agree, and I think it's interesting when going back to talking about the industry, right? And you look at these big, huge brands, these big, huge NGOs that are, that there's a lot of talk about how trust in these larger NGOs is really sort of plummeting,
Mm,
and in with that as backdrop, I find it interesting that they aren't able to engage through storytelling. When you think about the sector, the idea of saving the world, right? Conservation, climate change, um, that whole area has the potential to have so many stories. I almost imagine it like it's a story mine, right? Like the
mm,
the types of actions that are taking place, the people that are involved, the exotic places, the animals, there's so many opportunities for amazing storytelling, and we're just completely failing at that. When you look at the private sector takes storytelling really bloody serious, right? And everyone's trying to figure out how to tell stories. In the private sector, even there's a lot of talk about you need to be like a story first organization.
mhm.
Some good examples are like you've heard of Wrexham Football Club.
Yep,
They were bought by Ryan Reynolds and his mate, right? And
yep.
a big part of what they did was, and if you go and read now the Wrexham annual report, it's all about their social media views, right? The community who's watching them via social media, the merchandising that they can sell. It's not even about getting more people to the football games, right? They're at max capacity at the football games, but it's all about how do they turn their organization into a mass production storytelling machine, and that's
Mhm.
short form content, YouTube videos, obviously a documentary as well. I'm rambling a little bit. Sorry, Rob,
No,
but
you're not. No, it makes sense. I think what's happening is you need to think about how have people consumed stories and media sort of over the years, like written form, and then and then obviously like TV and cinema, and now we're in this age of the internet where it's just everyone's got a phone in their hands. You're never far away from consuming the next story, if you will, or the next nugget of whatever it is. Um, and yeah, rewilding and nature restoration and anything related to it, it is a mine of stories. There's so much to tap into there. Why people aren't doing it as much? Maybe there's this idea that a fear of not knowing how to do something, perhaps,
sure, yeah, definitely.
um, or perhaps it's like I say, they don't see it as a priority, which would be a sad thought if that's the case, because you know I've I I still get inspired by watching YouTube videos. I still get ideas, I still that's kind of I got into making content about nature because I was a viewer on YouTube.
Hmm.
Um, so I kind of owe everything I'm doing now to not only YouTube being the platform, but because I watched the stories. Yeah, no, I mean I would love to see I've all of these, like whether if you're like a little individual who's looking after like a small plot of land, there's a story there, right? Or if you're doing something which is much bigger, there's a story there which kind of needs to be told. And sure, not everyone has the skill sets, but you can find these people who can help you tell these stories. So
No,
perhaps that's
exactly.
why, yeah, perhaps that's why we're not seeing it. Um,
And that's part of the reason why I wanted to start Light Side of Green, was to try and play a small role in trying to share some of those stories. And it's not it's partly sharing stories of things, but it's also sharing stories of people, and
mm,
those, and then having connection around those. For instance, I was watching one of your films about the rewilding and the young wilders, right?
mhm,
And so I reached out to them, and I did a podcast episode with them. And just connecting with them through your story um, was really exciting, and I can really see they're becoming a movement of young people or
Mhm.
dynamic people who are looking to try to get involved and to do something. And the way for those people to get involved starts off with simple storytelling and connecting around simple stories like this. So
Yeah,
I
I
think it's
just
quite
feel like
exciting.
yeah, I feel like whether if you're a musician or if you're an artist or if you're if you're doing anything like what Young Wilders are doing, um, it's always better if you can reach a lot of people. And like now, the means of reaching people is social media. It is YouTube,
Yeah.
TikTok, all of these platforms. Yeah, I would say to anyone who would like to get into content creation and making videos, you just have to start. You just have to do it. Bit like you're doing with your podcast, like I did at the start. I just started. I didn't know anything about it. Um, and if your reasons why for doing it is to reach more people about something which you're passionate about, and like what's like, there's no greater message than like nature's recovery, really, is there? So and how it ties in with people and communities. So yeah, that's why I'm really satisfied now with the work I'm doing.
Good.
And you just have
And
to play the game, and you just have to play the game of YouTube.
right.
That's just what it is.
and
Yeah.
and so where do you sort of see things going with Leave Curious looking forward?
I think looking forward, I would like to keep featuring other people and other projects on the channel.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Make it because like if you imagine if you're making a video about nature restoration, if I was the if I was the re like if I was the one presenting it, I'd have to do all the research. I'd have to make sure I'm getting all my facts right. So it kind of makes sense that I just point the camera outwards. I go to these people like I did with Young Wilders, and just have them be the voice and tell us what they're doing. I feel like that's one interesting branch of content. Um, I also would like to eventually down the line have some land of my own and get into rewilding and run some projects and just live within it and document that process. That really excites me. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that idea of having the like the local groups being part of the story is quite interesting, because what I often think about is how can we scale that kind of storytelling into the sector, right? And
Mhm.
like, is it possible for you to sort of unlock other organizations storytelling by having them film content and then sort of rolling that up to you, and you doing
I see. Yeah.
pulling those
Well,
stories together? Like, do you see what I mean? Like, I don't know what that's called, like a
it's the
media
kind of
agency or
yeah,
something.
yeah, like Live Curious is the platform, like maybe the distribution place where all these stories go.
Right.
Is that what you mean? Something like that?
Something like that, where you're adding, you're sort of pulling together the stories a bit.
Mm.
You're optimizing for YouTube and things like that. But the actual filming and the voice is coming from those people on the ground.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ultimately, that would be a great way of doing things. But there's, some people who are better than others.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would say you could go down a route of having a bit of a mishmatch of a channel. Um, so what would be cool? I mean, like perhaps steps for Leave Curious going forward, perhaps could be to expand and not just do it on my own. Because then instantly you've got more people who can go out and capture more, and make more videos and tell more stories. But I don't think I'm quite there just yet. But that's something to bear in mind for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
yeah, no, it's a cool idea. I mean, I feel like happening all over are these really interesting projects, all these little nuggets. and a lot of the time the work just goes unheard and unseen. So yeah, I mean, I think people just need to feel empowered to take their phone out and film what they're doing and share it and not overthink social media um, a great deal. Sure, there are a lot of, social media can be a bit of a toxic place, but I feel like if you're going into it with really good intentions, only good can come of it, really.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I do think, a lot of people have that fear of having to overproduce something, right? And it's got to be the top end documentary to put it out. Otherwise, it's devaluing the work that we're doing. And I think
Mm.
really that's not the problem. The problem is you got to get stuff out there and engage people, right? I mean, that's the kind of the way we got to think about it. Is this is about just getting sharing a story and getting people engaged in what you're doing.
Hmm. That's it.
But
That's it. Yeah.
easier said than done.
It
So
is.
given sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it is. Like if it was that easy, then we'd be seeing a lot more of it, right?
Right, exactly. So I'm conscious of time.
Mm.
Um, so looking towards wrapping things up, if you had a silver wand and you could change something about the conservation sector in the UK right now, what would it be?
Um, oh, I would like to see, like 70% of all UK land is under agriculture, right? I
Yeah,
would like to see real incentives given to these landowners because agriculture and farming is pretty well subsidized. So I would like to see proper incentives given to these landowners to prioritize nature restoration or to prioritize regenerative agriculture, and communicate these ideas to them and set up a proper framework that takes it all quite seriously. Um, that's quite a big ask, but that's probably what I would do.
well, because I remember seeing you talk about a in the UK there was a lot of support for rewilding or regeneration, but less for rehabilitation of species.
Oh,
Um,
that was interesting. Yeah, that was a funny thing. Yeah, I think, yeah, that was about, the goal was, I think, the member of parliament at the times. I don't like to get too political, but you
sure.
kind of do. You kind of do if you kind of get into the world of rewilding. You realize it kind of is. What I've realized is that if rewilding is going to happen, it's going to be done by individuals. It's going to be done by people outside of government because and that kind of thing. Really, like they are the real driving force.
And,
Companies
and
like
that
Mozzarella, you know.
and that sort of leads to your last video where you talked about the definition of rewilding, and I really like that because I always had this idea that rewilding was this big thing that took a lot of work, and you had to rewild massive areas, and you had to make it so that then wolves would come back or something
Mhm.
huge like that. And your definition effectively was like it's about increasing biodiversity, and that can happen at any scale. Is
Right,
that
exactly.
correct?
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it further, and it's I guess you could say it's about increasing native biodiversity. But then, who's to argue that if biodiversity is improving all round, like who really cares as long as it's better than it was? Simple way of thinking about it, but I feel like when you're communicating these ideas, it needs to be simple and it needs to be accessible. It can't be as great as it would be to rewild the whole of the UK. Like that's just not going to happen. Like
Right.
you know, um, bit like what we saw with the hedge planting with the young wilders. Like that is a very very pragmatic way of getting a little bit of nature back into the countryside is by cornering off a small section of a field and giving that back to nature and weaving in these corridors. You're not going to
Right.
get anywhere if you're too far one way. You need to work with people. You need to understand what their needs are and what they're potentially struggling with, and then come to a solution that kind of meets in the middle.
Yeah, I was talking to the director of the Conservatoire de Littoral here in French. He's like the coast. They protect the coast here, and he was saying, the thing with climate change is for everything we could do, we probably won't see any benefits of the things that we do in our lifetimes. It's just a big, huge thing. However, if we think about biodiversity, we can do things right now, and everybody can do things right now and work on biodiversity. And guess what? That's going to help with climate change as well. And it's so much more consumable an idea. When people are thinking, "Oh God, we got to save the world," it almost blows the
In a
circuits,
possible
because it's like, well,
problem, yeah,
where the hell do I start, right?
yeah, you got to make it. You got to make it bite size. You got to make it something which everyone feels like they can be a part of. Because systemic problems like climate change, it kind of needs this systemic solution where people can feel empowered to go out in their garden and make it like. I feel like what's kind of at the heart of degradation and like this loss of nature is like a lack of community in a way, like this you know if we could all live in a way which was a little bit better connected, not just in terms of like nature but also like how we are in a community. Like imagine if all gardens grew their own food, and you're talking with your neighbors and you're working at these much smaller scales, but it's just you know if you want your fruit and veg, you go to a supermarket and it's been flown in from god knows where. There's I feel like solutions can happen on our like in our gardens, on our back doorsteps, like in our towns. And I feel like when you try and solve climate change, if you solve this crisis, this lack of biodiversity that way, it's just much more rewarding, to actually see the change happen. Like I've been rewilding my garden, so to speak, and
Yeah,
I've had frogs and newts coming in, and I've got a small garden. I'm sort of looking out on it now. It's kind of looking a little bit drab, but that's the time of year. But I know that in a
sure.
couple of months, the grass will grow long again, and I'll start seeing like slow worms and stuff. It's really encouraging, and that's what I enjoy about rewilding.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. That reminds me of Charles Eisenstein, I believe his name is, talks about this time being a time of separation, right? Our culture is a culture of separation, and we need to get back to connection. And so, what you're saying, that idea of like connecting, is really the key. And what, again, going back to the small biodiversity actions, the things that the young wilders are doing, the fact that you can connect with doing something tangible in your own garden, that is what is going to be the key to getting people to do stuff, getting people to connect with the idea, connect with their gardens, connect with nature, and it sort of
Yeah.
starts to feed itself and
That,
and
that's
become a
how I
change.
feel like. Yeah, that's how I feel like you get people who aren't necessarily even interested in nature into it. But as well
Right.
as that, you need to have the landscape scale stuff. You need to have like this
Yeah, of course.
strategic approach. But I feel like yeah, like you got to. I feel like what can I do to better the situation, and it's make these videos about nature restoration and to cover all of the many ways that it happens, um, and to only try and get better at that as well, and to also like practice what I preach as well. That's why
Hmm.
I say I would love to one day perhaps own like a bigger piece of land and have all of these fun, exciting little projects going on. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that would be really cool.
So, of all the films that you've made so far, are there one or two that are sort of your favorite that you're the most proud of?
Most proud of, maybe it's just the way YouTube works, but you kind of get on this grind of like one's done, next one, next one. I think I think what I really liked. I'm trying to, because obviously if a video gets loads of views,
Right.
So I'm trying to shut that part of my brain off and just think about. So a recent one which I made was this one about, how do we define rewilding? I think I packaged it like the huge problem with rewilding.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that one because, I didn't necessarily have to do like days and days of research. It was just something which, like, I kind of said to myself, I was like, Rob, like, what's a video that you can make right now? You don't have to like get in a car, get on a plane, travel anywhere. What do you feel is something that you can write about, and like, what's something that you feel like you can share? And it was that idea. Um, so that one felt really satisfying to make. Um, I also really like the ones, I haven't done enough of them, but I'm really trying to get better at networking and organize. Like, my calendar for this year is getting full of going out, seeing people. So I did one with the Ealing Wildlife Group, where they released some harvest mice to like a little park in London.
Hmm.
That was really fun because you're in the community, like children are there, you're seeing the smiling faces. That just felt so wholesome.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was quite cool. Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty proud of that one. Even though it hasn't like blown up, so to speak,
Sure.
in context of the channel. Um, yeah,
I'd
yeah.
say I really like the one you did where you redefined rewilding. For me, like, a lot of your videos are you being the voice for someone else's work, and it was nice to see that was kind of your voice coming out,
Mm,
and I
yes.
thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I think I need to lean into that a little bit more, as well, because uh, I guess I've been doing this now for the past decade, one way or another.
Right.
So I'm forming these. Yeah, I mean, like, you kind of go through this process of learning and understanding, and I feel like I'm getting to a place now where I can. Yeah, I've got a certain level of understanding, but it just feels like, as diverse and as wide as rewilding and nature restoration is, like you said, there's so many different aspects to dive into. Um, as fun as that is as a storyteller, that's also kind of overwhelming in a way. um, and that's kind of, I guess, why I've kept it focused to the UK right now. But
Right.
perhaps in the future with Leave Curious, I do want to take it abroad and, go to different places because there's just so much happening. But then it becomes a game of prioritizing and figuring out how to spend your time. And yeah, that's why
Yeah.
Mossy Earth is really cool, because we're now building out teams um, in all these different places. Um,
Yeah,
so it's
no,
cool.
that's it's really exploding. It's fantastic. I keep imagining that the challenge is going to be how to get even more and more stories, right? How to scale that. But it is
Yeah.
very exciting.
Yeah, no, it
Cool.
is. It's nice to be part of it. Cool.
Um, just a last question. Looking back at where you've come from, and if you were to give yourself or a young entrepreneur advice, what would your advice be?
Um, make sure you're constantly doing something, but ensure, because a lot of the time you think, oh, I want to become a YouTuber or I want to get to X place. You need to just get yourself busy, and like, you need to be doing things. But advice to my younger self, I was definitely busy. I was definitely doing things, but I didn't really analyze why things weren't working, or I didn't stop to think about, okay, so we've done this big body of work, or we've spent time doing this. How can we improve on that? Or how can we take what we've learned there? So I guess it's just to have a level of awareness as well. So, like, make sure you're busy, but just, stop and ask yourself questions as well.
Cool. And so, obviously, if people want to follow what you're working on, they should follow Leave Curious on YouTube. Is
Mhm.
there any other way you'd like people to reach out to connect with you?
I mean, Leave Curious, the YouTube channel is probably the best way. I try and reply to comments as well. If you're there just after the video goes live, I'll be replying to comments. But that's predominantly it for now. Yeah, yeah. You can send me an email as well, but that will be in the description of all my videos too. If you had like
Okay,
a point you wanted to chat about or discuss.
cool. Thanks, Rob. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Congratulations on your success. It's been really cool to follow your story.
Yeah, cool. No, thank you. No, it's great to be on.